What's going on out there, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children and children? Hey, this is Robert Phoenix, and I am broadcasting to you live from Flyover, also known as Austin, Texas. Welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. We're doing a video record today so I can prop up my internet views. People say they want to see my face, so here it is. My face to your face. How are you? It's not that you haven't seen my face before. My face has been all over the place. I did 25 shows for Gaia TV, which my face was fairly visible. And of course, I have done a number of interviews with people, so it's not like you don't get to see my face, but this is the 21st century and people want that transparencyism. I had to get over like a kind of a bad mood, like initially today. Yeah. So I was wandering around my apartment trying to find some stuff. And I realized that I had some things stolen when I moved. And they were like kind of important things. I don't want to get into it, but I realized I got stuff stolen. And I kind of know who did it. It was this little family, I believe. Who decided they were going to make off with a few of my things. They were helping me. God, I hate that. I hate thieves. I'm sorry. It's one of the worst things that I can like wrap my head around. Like when somebody breaks into your car, snatches like a stereo or smashes, I hate that stuff. It's just a complete violation, total violation. So I just have to work through it, right? Get over it, forgive them. I was going to use this today as part of my set. It just didn't work. It will, though, at some point. It will. So what's going on as I move through my emotions and my forgiveness, and this too shall pass, and all things are ultimately dust, all that stuff, all those things we tell ourselves. There's a hell of a lot going on in the world today now, isn't there? We're going to talk about some of that. And we're also going to talk today about the pernicious quality of terms and conditions, which are now starting to pop up all over the place on the internet. I don't know if you've noticed it. I certainly have. Over on Yahoo, which I don't really use. I have a Yahoo account that I don't really use anymore, but it was my first email address, so I use it as a POP server, and I have it forwarded to another email address that I still use or do use. So I was over on Yahoo, and they're asking me to sign this oath. And it's like, it's a freaking internet. Why do I need to sign an oath? Well, there's a reason why I need to sign an oath, or you need to sign an oath, or people are being asked to sign oaths. And we're going to get into that today. And we're going to get into what happens when the internet begins to shut down. And I'm not talking about like a shut down in the sense that you won't be able to use the internet. That'll always be there. There's too much commerce tied up into the internet. Jeff Bezos. By the way, have you ever looked at like Jeff Bezos' face? He has one of the least symmetrical faces I've ever seen. It's like bizarre. He's almost like that character Two-Face from Batman. Like one side of his face, his eyes open like this. The other side of his face completely like shut. It's weird. It's like there are two people living in there. I wonder if that's like a sign of trauma. Some sign of trauma and programming. We don't know a lot about Jeff Bezos, do we? Although I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Amazon was barely able to make a profit. Like they were, for a long time, Amazon was like almost any other internet business, and they were able to stick around and get a leg up. They must have gotten some kinds of economic boosts along the way. I'll look into it. Maybe we'll do a show on Amazon and Bezos. That would be, well, we know that the practices of Amazon, whether it's inside the company itself, are pretty cutthroat. And I've read lots of accounts, and there are people who have they get so working for Amazon is quite lucrative, as one might assume. And the lucrative part is, I think if you stick around for about 3 or 4 years, maybe four, I think, was it 4 years? I think if you're there for 4 years, like you've got stock and it vests, it like totally vests after 4 years. So everybody's like sticking around for their 4-year investiture. I remember when I had internet stock. Boy, I thought I was the shit. That wasn't really the case. I was working for an internet company, and I got all these shares. It was great until we started losing money, and then those shares were going into the sub-zero range. The whole NASDAQ internet stock bubble was such a scam. It was a total scam. People who were running these internet companies, they were all backlisting. They were all backlisting their options. They were vesting them earlier than they should have. I mean, it was prevalent. And I know instances where that happened. And there are people inside the company who helped build the company, blah, 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 and they didn't get to backlist their shares. There were some people who had significant shares in the company who were told, hold on to them, hold on to them, hold on to them, don't sell. Meanwhile, they're selling. It's like, that's the human condition. This is what humans do. We're pretty sad lot at times. However, we're also capable of tremendous things. And we're also capable of amazing self-sacrifice at times. When we talk about that, we enter into the realm of Neptune and Pisces, where we have such a wide range of spiritual potential and spiritual resonance mixed with a really low level of consciousness. I mean, that's the nature of Neptune. That's the nature of Pisces. You can just ride that elevator straight to the 12th dimension, or you can wind up on the gutters and the streets, or even worse, on this plane of existence. Anyway, the new terms and conditions are pernicious, and we're going to talk about them and why it's taking place and why it's so subtle and why it seems to be across a lot of different platforms. We got a lot of action in the chat room today. Let's acknowledge our chatters in the Council of Five. Let's see what we have here. My wise Council of Five. What do we have here? We have more. I just saw this as the lead item on Yahoo. Jane Doe gives chilling account entailed one of Allison Mack's alleged sex slaves. You know what's really, really interesting? There's a movie from the 70s called Return of the Mack. It's a movie about a pimp in Oakland. So Allison Mack has, it's like she's the Mack. Allison Mack is the pimp. She was the pimp. Judy Anderson, Low Life Creeps. Diana, Morning Robert. Maury, just lost sound. I don't know why you just lost sound. Mary, I've gotten 5 to 6 new terms and conditions sounding like my privacy will be more protected. No. Diana says, one sure sign of trauma is the right eye droops. There you go. Bezos has a major eye droop going on. Major. Look at one of his photos sometimes. Got a big shout out to my boy, Steve Crimmy. Happy 6-0, Steve. Let's see. Good morning, Robert. The Oath thing is the name of the new conglomeration. Hear you on all these new TOC. Here's what they say. Yahoo is now part of Oath, the media and tech company behind today's top new sports and entertainment sites and apps. Oath. Oh, thanks, faux hat. I still don't like it. But the TNCs are like oaths. It's like we're taking oaths. And we don't even – anybody ever read through the TNCs? Like a TNC, theoretically, if you were to get terms and conditions for buying a house, which everybody does, you get a contract to buy the house. You sit down, you look at the contract. If you have a good lawyer, a real estate agent, you agree to this, you don't agree to this, you agree to this, and you send it back and they say, well, okay, we'll agree to this and not agree to this. And then you hammer it out. Could you imagine sending your terms and conditions back? Say, well, I don't agree to this. I think next time I get one, that's what I'm going to do. I want this taken out. If you want me to be part of your service, I want this taken out. I want my own relationship. But again, we just sign off on it. Well, if they say you can't use it, then at that point, then you have to then figure out what you're going to do. But it's coming down to a point where it's going to be unavoidable and inevitable that we're all going to have to sign the terms and conditions. At which point, you're going to have to ask yourself, well, where is this all going? Well, where it's all going is to be able to shut you down. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Jordan Sather. I'm just, going to be upfront about it. I'm not going to get into any kinds of shilling or whatever. But he was, again, shut down yesterday on YouTube. His Destroy the Illusion channel was shut down. He was talking about that on Twitter. As much as I'm not a fan of Jordan Sather, I think Jordan Sather should have his YouTube channel. You can figure out whether or not you like Jordan Sather. If you don't like him, then you can move on. If you do like it, then watch his material. I think it's, I think the whole QAnon thing is a limited hang. I do think it's connected to Trump. I did the chart. I looked at Trump's chart in conjunction with the QAnon chart. They are connected. It is coming through Trump, however it's coming through, whether it's through Jared Kushner and his connection to Tal Piot and the IDF or whatever. I don't know the exact mechanisms. I do believe it's connected to Trump. I also believe it's a limited hang, and I also believe with QAnon you need to be cautious. You need to be very, very cautious. Look at it, deal with it, take what you want from it, assimilate or not assimilate, move on. Before we get into the terms and conditions stuff, I just want to go through kind of a list of headlines here that is always helpful. This whole thing with the FBI is really, in the Trump campaign, this thing is going to explode. This thing is going to explode in a big way. Now, here's the deal. Trump basically says that he was being spied on by the FBI. Amongst other people, the NSA was involved, obviously, with Clapper and the CIA. If you want to really drill down, it is a trifecta. It is a triple crown of surveillance and information gathering. Okay. And it's clear that this is taking place. Clear if it was taking place. Now you have on the left, and the left is basically saying, well, we did that for your own good. We were trying to protect you. If you're on the left, you're seeing the efforts of the FBI and the CIA as being, patriotic? Because you want them to spy on Trump. You want them to spy on or gather intelligence because he may or may not have connections with the Russians. The whole Russian thing was being stoked even before Trump became president. The Russian thing was being stoked and fueled just as Saturn was going into Sagittarius. And I'll never forget, I was in Virginia Beach, and I gave a talk in Virginia Beach at the For Purpose Inc. gathering there. And at that time, I was really exploring Saturn going through the 12th house of the U.S. chart. This is the Sibley chart. And I looked at other times Saturn was in Sagittarius and it was going through the U.S. 12th house. And on almost every occasion, there were significant events that had to do with Russia. And the last time that Saturn had been in Sagittarius was, we could see with the Saturn and Scorpio transit, and then leading into Saturn and Sag, that there was a lot happening in terms of going behind the scenes and Reagan's talks with Gorbachev, and you could begin to see that there is this shift taking place. And it does take place during Saturn and Sag, where eventually Russia, as we know it, begins to fall and collapse. And eventually that fall and collapse takes place with Saturn and Capricorn. But everything was set into motion prior to that. The world got rearranged with Saturn and Capricorn. The entire world got rearranged. And I would be very, very surprised if it doesn't get rearranged again. In fact, we're kind of looking at it right now in the Middle East. You go back 30 years before that, so we're talking, let's see, that would be 1955. So mid-1950s, height of the Cold War. It's just the Cold War is just really, really ramping up. Mid-50s to late 50s, height of the Cold War. So roughly like 56 to 59. And then leading, of course, into the 60s with the Bay of Pigs and Cuba and all that heavy-duty stuff, right? But it's the rise of the Soviet Union and the whole thing with communism and Joe McCarthy, and a lot of that stuff was real, by the way. And so every time Saturn went into Sagittarius, there was this major action going on between the U.S. and Russia. And of course, it was already happening. And we have to go back to 2015 to see really where it was starting to take off, because that's when Saturn went into Sagittarius. And I was looking at it, I was talking about it, I said, look, you're going to see, this is what's going to happen. You're going to see a tidal or a pole shift between Russia and the United States, and Russia's going to look more, I didn't say become more, but look more like the United States. The United States was going to look more like Russia. And at that time, that was true because of Barack Obama being president of the United States. And Barack Obama is a social Marxist, and I don't have any problem saying that. That's what he was trained in. Excuse me. That's what his parents were trained in. I have no problem saying that. And that was his role and goal. His role and goal was to roll out social Marxism in this country. And Hillary was supposed to take that torch and carry on. You know, one of the things that people say, well, the election was rigged, or the election was fixed. I think that there were some things going on in the wee hours of the election where things were kind of hanging in balance. And I believe that they could have pushed that election either way at some point, which is why it took them so long to be able to call it. And I think Trump did a deal. And part of the deal was that he was not going to go after Hillary Clinton, which he hasn't, obviously, and probably won't. But the reason why I don't think it's completely rigged is because Hillary Clinton, whoever this person is that's showing up as Hillary Clinton, let's assume it's Hillary Clinton, she won't let this go. She's not going to let it go. They're trying to overturn the election results. Again, they've been doing this from day one. From day one. Now, what's going to happen here, and this is if you're a Democrat, this is your absolute worst case scenario. If you're on the left, this is your worst case scenario. What will happen is that they're going to ultimately, if they can, because Rod Rosenstein is a holdover from Obama. I don't know why Trump kept Rosenstein in there. Maybe he thought just because he's Jewish, he was going to be okay. because, of course, Trump has surrounded himself with Goldman Sachs people, and he's up to his third eye with the Chabad Lubavitch stuff. And, I think it's really important to be able to talk about this now in a very open kind of way. And this is why the terms and conditions stuff are starting to kick in. Okay, this is why. Because when we unlock the mind for politically correct or incorrect speech, we can go places that we haven't gone before, because society has, done this number. You shouldn't go there. Don't go there. And this is not with hate or malice in our hearts. Not at all. And this is what, they want to project onto anybody who goes into the forbidden zone. Oh, it's driven by hate and driven by malice. No, it's not. What it's driven by is truth and trying to understand how things are being played out in our culture and in our society, and have been for a very, very long time. And so when we unlock the mind, when the mind lock of freedom of speech comes off, or politically correct speech comes off, and I've talked about this, people are going to address things that they haven't addressed for a while. I mean, think about this. Let's say you've been traumatized for a really, really long time, which many of us have. I mean, we just live on a planet of trauma. It's true. And all of a sudden the trauma stops. Like, what are you going to do? Like at first you're like, oh shit, am I going to get hit again? Is my food going to be taken away? Somebody going to violate me? And all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And it's like, wow, I'm free, right? I'm kind of free here, right? And that takes a while. And all of a sudden you take steps towards expressing your personal rights and personal freedoms. And next thing you know, you're doing everything you can to come back into your body and be a fully functioning human. When that takes place, you do certain things that you hadn't done in a while, or maybe ever done at all. So this is what's happened with the election of Trump, is he unlocked the politically correct mind lock. Now people are starting to talk about things that are making people in positions of power very nervous, which is why we're getting into the new terms and conditions stuff. So keep that in mind, okay? So Trump left Rosenstein, and I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, for a guy that's made so much money, theoretically, and has the art of the deal and 5D chess, I mean, that was really stupid. I mean, the only thing that that I could think of with the Rosenstein deal, because he's a holdover, the only thing I could think of was that maybe they could get intel from him about Obama. Maybe he would, leak on the other side, keep your friends close, enemies closer. I don't know. But it's pretty clear where that guy's allegiance and loyalties lie, to be honest with you. So now what's going to happen is they're going to, if they can, they're going to back engineer this stuff, and it's going to go right back to Obama and Susan Rice and Susan Power and James Clapper and John Brennan. And the Obama administration is going to be in hot water because let's say, for instance, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all these people, were really concerned about Donald Trump and really concerned about his presidency and really concerned about the American public. You think they're really concerned about them? No, they're not. What they're concerned about is their jobs, their perks, their money, their family, their family's money. That's what they're concerned about. Period. End of story. Everything else is just window dressing. That's all it is. It's just window dressing. I mean, I think maybe somewhere, some people going, oh man, love a country. I love this country. I love this country. I'm going to go work for this agency. I'm going to go take down the creeps that want to take our freedom away from us. And then, of course, they get in and they find out it's quite different. Not too unlike service in the armed forces. Very similar in some ways. So if they were really, 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 really doing the American people a service, then, oh, well, look, of course, hey, go at it. But they're not, because they could investigate any number of countries that have power and influence on elections and candidates. Trust me, China's involved, Russia's involved, Israel's involved. Or, they get their fingers. The Crown of England is involved. The Pope is involved. They're all involved. They've all got their pointy little fingers and claws into the country, into the heart of this country. Of course. They pay off politicians and they garner influence and power. I mean, how do you think China has all these free tax zones in the United States? They've got free zones where they can set up companies where they're not taxed. That was all negotiated. It was all negotiated. Look it up. Check it out. But if you're on the left and you're progressive, and it's true that Obama was involved in spying, which it certainly seems like that's the case. That could be hot water. Now it comes down to this really pernicious question. Do people really care about facts and truth? And facts and truth aren't always the same, by the way. Let's be clear. Some people can have facts, and if they're based on some sort of scientific model, and the scientific, or not some sort of, there's one scientific model, but if it's based on a scientific experiment or trial, and in many cases, trials are rigged. They're rigged in many cases to have a certain outcome. Well, you can derive facts from that outcome. You can parse facts. You can look at a certain percentage of people. Like, let me see if I can come up with an example. There's a quarterback who came out of college in the recent NFL draft by the name of Josh Rosen, who is a pretty polarizing character. He's an Aquarius, and he's kind of a mouthy Aquarius. He likes to think he's really smart and has enlightened opinions, and he grew up around big time money. His father, I think, was a brain surgeon or something. And he came out of college, and he was kind of a yellow flag quarterback for NFL executives. And a lot of them didn't want to draft him because he was a smart ass. And if you're in the NFL, you don't want a smart ass as a quarterback. It can be bad for the team and bad for a coach. Now, you want a smart quarterback, but you don't always want a quarterback too smart. Like Aaron Rodgers, right on the edge of being smart and too smart. Josh Rosen may be kind of over that edge. So Colin Cowherd was talking about Josh Rosen. And he said that 20% of the NFL executives were not into Josh Rosen. 20%. So you would think that 80% were. Well, that's not really the case. But and the way that was parsed out, it was like they wouldn't, like 20% were, here's how it was. 20% of the NFL executives were more into Baker Mayfield, who went number 1 overall. And so Colin Cowherd took that as a fact, that 80% of the league would have taken Josh Rosen. Well, what he didn't take into account when there were, 3 other quarterbacks besides Josh Rosen who were being talked about for the number 1 pick in the draft. It was Sam Darnold, Lamar Jackson, and another Aquarius, Josh Allen. So that 80% now gets parsed out between 4 people, 4 quarterbacks. So 20% of Baker Mayfield's part is probably more dominant than the other 4 who were split up. It could have been 15, 10, 20. And by the way, I think it was 40% for Baker Mayfield. I'm sorry, it was 40%. So 40% would have taken him. Number one, he had 60%. So the way basically Colin Cowherd was trying to parse this thing out was that, based on everybody else, well, Josh Rosen was the guy. Well, he wasn't really the guy because there were other quarterbacks. Do you see what I'm talking about? You can take facts and you can parse them. Facts don't always equal truth. And remember that. That's really, really important. And this is used all the time by people in the vaccine industry. Well, we have facts. We have facts. Again, the facts are parsed based on whatever kind of research has been done and been front-loaded so they can get a particular outcome or result. Now, bringing this back to the whole Clinton thing, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, if the left believes that Donald Trump is corrupt. Now, this is an important part. If this information had come to light right after the election, within 6 months after the election, we'd be in a very, very different place now. First of all, it'd be behind the country. And I'm not sure they actually wanted it to be behind the country because it's a major distraction. It's polarizing people. It's tearing families apart still to this day. So I think they have a kind of some skin in the game with that. But let's just say, for the sake of what if, that they actually tackled this within the first 6 months, which clearly the facts are there, right? So the information is there. It's on the table. It would have been much more powerful within this first 6 months because what's happened since the election is the amount of enmity and scorn and outrage and hate that has been brewing for the last 2 years around Donald Trump, whether you like him or not or support him or not. Clearly, this has been a major operation, unlike anything I've ever seen in my entire life for a president. It almost feels like something straight out of Latin America in the 1970s or 80s where these things occurred, which is not a good sign for the country, by the way. Now, when we have an event like this, and it looks like that there have been collusion and all kinds of things that were going on, and Obama had his fingerprints on it, and Susan Rice, and all these people, if you're on the left and a progressive, are you more or less inclined to believe the story that they were spying, or do you stick by your guns because of the hate and the enmity and the rage and the toxicity that's been stirred up with Trump for the last 2 years? Do you just ride that train? Even in the face of, well, there's theoretically no Russian collusion, and that came out. Do you still ride that train? How invested are you really in the truth that this happened and it is not a great thing? A standing president theoretically should not be able to do what Barack Obama did, which is essentially turn the NSA, the FBI, and the CIA into his own private security and surveillance force. This is not too unlike Richard Nixon and Watergate. And I did yesterday's show, and actually it was 2 days ago. On Monday's show, I started to cruise around and look at what was happening, what the pundits were saying, and they were saying exactly the same thing I was saying. The only difference is I was just putting it together kind of in my own way. I wasn't really following them, but clearly it came out in the same way. Many of them were saying that, well, this is Watergate on steroids, and it is. It's total Watergate on steroids. He only does this when I'm recording something, and today I'm recording, of course, for YouTube. He doesn't do this when I'm just like doing the Spreaker trip. For those of you not seeing this, my totem, Jasper, has just made an entrance into the frame. So this is going on. I want to read you a little bit here about Stephen Halper. And this is from Dean Henderson, whose work I really like. He's from Texas. He's a Texan. And Dean is one of these guys who's pretty much a straight shooter. I would say, if anything, Dean might be, a little on the left, and that's okay. If the left is standing up for people's rights, really, truly, and I'm not talking about bullshit identity politics. I'm talking about like the American worker, and people are jacked around by giant pharmaceutical companies. Where's the left with the whole vaccine thing? I mean, you would think that that's something that they'd be all over. No, they're not. If the left was anti-GMO, anti-vaccine, and anti-EMF and in 5G, then the left would have some validity. But they've lost the path, mainly because they're compromised by huge amounts of money. They don't want to get into it. Okay, FBI mole. This is from Dean Henderson, The Left Hook. Great blog, by the way. So I don't always agree with Dean, but he's a good thinker. He's a great researcher, has a lot of facts at his disposal. So I'm going to read this. In response to the Monday outing of FBI mole Stephen Halper, President Trump tweeted this morning, "Look how things have turned around on the criminal deep state. They go after phony collusion with Russia, a made-up scam, and end up getting caught in a major spy scandal, the likes of which this country may never have seen before. What goes around comes around." This came from Trump. Oh, and by the way, whatever terms and conditions Trump signed on with Twitter, apparently now he can't block anybody. This is a ruling. He cannot block anybody. So if Trump doesn't like you, guess what? You can't be blocked. Well, I think that probably will cut both ways. And let's see how fair and just their terms and conditions are when at some point, somebody on the quote unquote left or whomever doesn't like what somebody's saying. Let's see what happens to them. It should come as no surprise to regular readers of this column that the FBI informant outed this past week for spying on the Trump campaign is a well-connected Crown agent in the service of the City of London power structure. So here we go. Remember I was saying it's not just all these countries have their little pointy fingers in the elections, in the American pot, which is ultimately, guess what? Taxation. Money that comes out of people's paychecks. Huge amounts of money. That's what they're all after. It's found money. And then currying favor, of course, and getting their own little tax exempt status like the Chinese have done with their tax-free zones. All right, let me keep reading here. Stephen Halper is a retired 73-year-old Cambridge University professor who served in the Nixon, Ford, and Reagan administrations. He has close ties to both U.S. and British intelligence. Halper met with Trump campaign advisor Carter Page in June 2016. That's interesting. That's the month of Gemini, right? June is a Gemini month, and Trump is a Gemini, and he's a Gemini on steroids. And this is what happens. I guess this is the Trump effect. You come at him, and then you get this kind of reverse psychic quantum Aikido move, and the next thing you know, you're trying to come up for air. It's very interesting. Halper met with Trump campaign advisor Carter Page in early June 2016, contradicting FBI Director James Comey's claims that this meeting occurred nearly a month later. The two met at a British symposium, after which Page was a regular guest at Halper's Virginia farm. British MI6 often refers to its operation as the farm. In late August, Halper met with Trump co-chair Sam Clovis. Clovis, is that interesting? That's a bloodline name, by the way. Where he offered to serve as a foreign policy advisor. A few days later, Halper offered Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos $3,000 and an all-expense paid trip to London. In exchange, the young Trump aide was to write a paper about energy in the Eastern Mediterranean region. All right. Halper was on the payroll, of the Office of Net Assessment, a shadowy Department of Defense think tank. He was paid $282,000 in 2016 and $129,000 in 2017. Trump trade policy advisor Peter Navarro tried to get Halper a high-level job in the new administration. Navarro must also be a Crown agent. Halper's father-in-law had been CIA deputy director, and Halper worked on the 1980 campaign of former CIA director George H.W. Bush. Halper donated $85,000 to Bush, who was defeated that year in the Republican primary by Ronald Reagan. Reagan, who had been openly criticized by David Rockefeller's Trilateral, Commission during the primary debate, then survived an assassination attempt by John Hinckley Jr. Okay, let's stop there. I'm not sure Reagan survived that attempt, by the way. I'm not so sure. If you go down the cloning rabbit hole, and I have, and again, my personal belief, and may take away from whatever you think about me, I do believe in cloning. I think it exists. And they've been working on this stuff for. I've done numerous shows on cloning. It's Gemini. We can have we can have a discussion about cloning. So I think Reagan was replaced, and essentially George H.W. Bush was running the Reagan administration most of that time. The Hinkleys are a prominent oil industry family with close ties to the Bushes. It's true. After Reagan won the primary, Halper went to work spying on Democratic nominee Jimmy Carter, using former CIA agents, likely Crown moles, to do this. At one point, they even stole some of Carter's pre-debate talking points. In this capacity, it's highly likely that Halper also had a hand in the infamous October surprise, brought to light by journalist Barbara Honegger. U.S. hostages have been held in Iran after the 1979 revolution were being used as a battering ram against Jimmy Carter, who lost to Reagan because he had a weak foreign policy. That's true. The hostages were released 20 minutes after Reagan's inaugural speech. You think that was any mistake? Of course not. Or just coincidence? Many believe this gave Reagan the edge he needed to beat Carter in that election. Illegal arms sales to Iran followed. It came to be known as the Iran-Contra scandal. A month after the Papadopoulos trap was set, Donald Trump Jr. was approached by a representative of Saudi princes who offered to help the Trump campaign. An Israeli political strategist was in attendance, then leaked the occurrence to the media. Okay, so look at this right now. This is great. So we have just the one storyline with this guy, Stephen Halper. The Saudis, the Israelis, Crown City of London. Okay, there you go. What did I say about the clause? The Saudis and Israelis both answer to the City of London, since both were created by the Illuminati bankers to ensure their hegemony over Middle East oil. The Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916 laid the groundwork for the 1970 Balfour Declaration, which called for the establishment of Israel, the British Protectorate of Palestine. The 1922 Treaty of Jeddah gave the previously unknown family of Ibn Saud a monarchy over the formerly British Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, so they were both set up simultaneously. Though surrounded by Crown agents like Jared Kushner, John Bolton, and Mike Pompeo, and financially indebted to Rothschild Inc. via Wilbur Ross, that is true, we have to hope Trump turns on his creditors, handlers, calls off the dogs of war, continues to expose the deep state for what it really is. The same City of London Crown, which has used America as its mercenary army bitch for over a century. The offensive on the Luciferians continues. Hang him high, liberty or death. Okay, I thought Dean did a pretty good job in that article, but he kind of makes it appear as though the Israelis are just the dogs and the bitches of the Crown City of London. And I'm not so sure that's the case. I think that there is probably some level of, I wouldn't say it's equality, but there's some level of equal and shared amounts of power between the two. Let's put it that way. Okay, so I think Dean may want to deflate the city and crown of London, which is very powerful. Don't get me wrong. Everything here in this country is set up so that we're vassals of the city of London. And then we get into natural law and that whole discussion. And that is the ultimate rabbit hole, right? What's this? Hold on. Okay. So I just wanted to read that to you because this gives you an idea as to, well, it's not just what went on with Trump. It's been going on for a while. It's been going on for, I mean, yes, I believe that Obama was up to his, he was up to his funny head with with the tributary of scars, in spying on Trump. Maybe he was told to do it. I don't know, but clearly his administration had the power and the keys to do it. Have they done it with other people? Of course. Did it happen with Mitt Romney? Maybe. Kerry, it didn't happen with Kerry. Kerry was a Skull and Bones member with George Bush. They had that thing nailed down, plotted out, nailed down, done. Right? Done. Maybe presidents should have terms and conditions that they need to sign. Maybe they do. I'm sure they actually do, without a doubt. They take him down into the basement of the White House and they show him a few things. And they say, sign here. Okay, what else do we have going on? Well, there is the ongoing saga of North Korea. Now it looks like there's not going to be any summit because Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, I mean, these characters, man, they're just overcompensating. Like, they're overcompensating. Where in their life are they deficient? And they're overcompensating, and it's like a small group of individuals that have theoretically immense power over the rest of us. It's completely and utterly bizarre. And look, North Korea is an asset. I think that's been pretty well established in some ways. Like, they can turn North Korea off and on like a switch. That's my thought. But it's not like they want, true peace. These people just don't really want true peace. And I think that's what it really comes down to. They don't want true peace. They want some kind of either ongoing chaos, which they can get into and hijack and move around and engineer, which is all part of their Ordo Ab Chao program. Or they want some kind of like weird victory, like the weird victory of grabbing the poor bastard who they thought was Osama bin Laden. Like, that was not Osama bin Laden. I'm sorry. But these are the kinds of victories that theoretically count for something, some kind of political cachet. And even Saddam Hussein, was that guy even Saddam Hussein? I don't think so. They're pulling him out of the rat hole, and they're, running him through the streets. Vigilante justice. America has its day. Well, who's out there now? Is it Kim Jong-un? Do they want to like bring Kim Jong-un to the United States and, hit him, tie him up on a stake and throw rocks at him? Is that the kind of victory that people really in their heart of hearts desire? It's brutal and it's savage. And even the celebration of the victory of taking down, theoretically, Al-Qaeda, which still exists, by the way. It still exists, and it's in Afghanistan, and apparently that's who we're fighting, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So now they've got this ongoing, like, sideshow of North Korea Happening, not happening. Happening, not happening. We're going to shoot the missile. We're not going to shoot the missile. Can it get any more Gemini than that? I don't think so. I think it's probably about as Gemini as it can get. Meanwhile, here come the terms and conditions. And the terms and conditions are set up so that ultimately they can just flip a switch. And if we don't agree with the unspoken terms and conditions of being a resident or a vassal or chattel or whatever it is that we're perceived of or as, in perhaps the most kind of negative sense, they'll flip the switch. Didn't you read the terms and conditions? Well, you can't say that. You can't do that. Sorry. This gets back to the whole Talpiot program. And this is why I don't think we're ever going to have World War III as we know it, unless, of course, it's the Russians. And again, I'm not being a Russophobe, but I could actually see Europe going to war again with the Russians, by the way. I think that could happen. If there's going to be a war, I think that's where it could happen. But if you look at the Talpiot program, which is a program that has to do with cybersecurity and infrastructure, communications, surveillance, but it's more than that. The Talpiot program also taps into power grids. So that's a lot of power to be able to go in and turn on and turn off somebody's power, somebody's internet. I mean, that's the ultimate power, right? Because we're so wired up now that if you want to, you just flip a switch and you can send a country back into the Stone Ages. How powerful is that? You don't have to drop an atomic bomb now to send people back into the Stone Ages. You just have to take away their power and their internet and then see what happens. And that's part of the new terms and conditions as well, right? Whether it's the lights or the power or your internet connection, or whether it's the connection that you have with a service that's inside the internet, with a flick of a switch, there can be a very different reality that you're dealing with. So the terms and conditions are important. And they're important in the sense that they set us up for something much larger. And in some ways, it's the terms and conditions of being a human on this planet and in this third dimensional realm. And it's all about consent. It's totally about consent. When we don't give our consent, then we're not giving our power to that entity. And we are tricked into giving our consent consistently. And it happens in interpersonal relationships as well. And where it happens is where we are vulnerable, where we are our weakest. And we all have our weaknesses and we all have our vulnerability. And that's where we give consent, because we're looking for somebody else to come in and mollify that part of who we are, that part of our vulnerability. It's all about being loved, right? Love me, accept me, recognize me, see how important I am, see how special I am, see, all these things. This is really the Achilles heel of the human experience. And most people don't even understand it. But even when they do understand it, getting to it, boy, that is really an intense place. Because you got to go through some serious mind shifts to get to it and then move past it. Because part of that process will ultimately make you feel quite alone. And that's the last thing I think we want to do. But paradoxically, by doing that, it brings you back into the connection of the human experience and the human family in a different kind of way. So we're always kind of being engaged from that standpoint. Now, how do we have systems where we do not give our consent? So I had to sign a new consent agreement for Spreaker, like many of you have had to just by listening to this podcast. And if you get into it and look at it, there's terms, and I looked at it, there are terms, conditions about being hateful and racist. And again, these are all really, really objective or subjective, my bad, subjective propositions, conditions. And it also cuts to the heart of free speech. A good friend of mine, Linda, sent me this text about a guy by the name of Schlossberg, who apparently is like some DA or something in Rhode Island, and he said a lot of, like, I don't know, he's a lawyer, or I don't know the complete story. Excuse me, but he said a lot of stuff that was, neo-Nazified and stuff like that, right? And she said, well, what do you do about something like this? And I said, well, what can you do? It's allowed by the Constitution. And he's allowed to say what he has to say, or say what he wants to say, needs to say. Now, whether or not you want to hire him as a lawyer, well, that's your business. Okay? If what he says is so repugnant, then people will not give him their business. It happens all the time. Conversely, if there was somebody who was, really deep into the, Black Lives Matter, militancy trip, sort of the opposite version of that, they have the right to say that. It's in our Constitution. Excuse me. They have the right to say that. And yeah, do you want to work with them or not? That's up to you. People should be allowed to make their own choices. This is how this thing works. We're in a marketplace of either competing ideas, competing ideologies, or people trying their very best, at times not always doing a very good job of it, to disseminate some level of truth. And by their fruits they shall be known. This is how it works. You cut off the neo-Nazi guy, you got to cut off now sort of the black militant side, right? Or you got to cut off the La Raza side, or you got to cut off the hardcore Zionist side. Well, okay. If you're going to go down that path, then cut them all out. We cut everybody out. And then let's see what happens. Let's see what we're able to talk about. No, you let them all exist. What you don't want to do is put the mind lock on so that one group has the ability to speak their truth, while another group has a lesser ability to speak their truth. It should all be in one cauldron, one stew, okay? If there's any terms and conditions that we need to agree to, that should be the terms and conditions that we agree to. Oh, and by the way, there's a thing called the Constitution. Kind of says it in there, right? It does. It's going to be very interesting. Things are getting hot, man. They're getting real hot. You know what happens when things get hot? We get false flags. That's what happens when things get hot. So get ready. Just as this thing is about to erupt like Kilauea in Hawaii, well, we're going to see some social disruptions here, especially with Mars and Aquarius, which is, by the way, squaring off against, at this point, Uranus and Taurus. It's going to get explosive. It's going to get explosive. You can count on it. All right, let me get back into the chat room. Let's see what people are saying in the chat room. What do we got here? Cloning is likely based on evidence. It is out there, but that's where we live now. Thank you, Diana, for sharing such an outside belief. Lynn, am I the only one who remembers that 3 days after the election, Hillary said she lost because of Russian interference? I thought, how did she know that only 3 days after? It told me then the Russian thing was pre-planned. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Hillary won't let it go now, though. See, that's the deal. She won't let it go, which is why I think in some ways it wasn't totally rigged. Like, I think Hillary thought that she was actually going to win that election for any number of reasons. And then when it went the other way, she got pissed. She's not letting it go in true Scorpio fashion. Q seems to push the Internet Bill of Rights thing. Makes you wonder about who's behind that. Okay, I don't follow the Q stuff religiously. It is not my daily reading of Q-based scripture. But does Q ever talk about Jared Kushner? Question mark. Paul, if you're still in that chat room and you read some Q stuff, does he ever talk about Kushner? I don't seem to recall any Kushner posts. Yeah, regulation is coming for sure. Let's see. Hillary can't let it go because it was super rigged for her to win, and Trump won anyway. I think you're, Judy. I think that you're right. I think Hillary thought that she was going to win. And look, here's my deal. The people who want to control people, clearly there is a group that's a control group, right? Control group and the controlled. Judy says, I don't remember Q discussing much anything. Of course, Kushner, I doubt. If you do a quick Google search of Q and Kushner, it'd be interesting to see what comes up. But the control group could push things either way. Okay, it's still the control group. So remember, the two main factions seem to be the social Marxists and the neocons, and so they're willing to. There's a lot of Kushner in the memes section. I don't know what that means. Meme section. Maybe Paul, you can break it down into little chat factoids so we can be up to speed on that. Because I don't read. I've read some Q. I don't read a lot. I'm more interested in kind of the structure of the charts and what I perceive to be a limited hang for whatever reason. But I'd like to learn more about that. So the control. Okay, so we're the control group, but there's a group that is into controlling the control group, right? And they could push it either way. They could go social Marxist, and they could go neoliberal, or they could go nationalist, neocon, zaocon. It doesn't really matter as long as they get people into kind of one system, right? One order. So I think they looked at the general vibe of the American people, the spirit of the American people, and they said, okay, well, I think the populist thing is probably going to be has more juice and energy around it. So let's go in this direction. And I really feel like that the election hung in the balance at about about 3 a.m. East Coast time, and I think a deal was made. And that's when Trump became president of the United States. And to get to that point where you're actually having a knockdown drag out with Hillary Clinton and get that far, well, that actually is something to really consider. And to actually take out Neil Bush during the primaries, which was a thing of beauty, by the way. I love that. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget Trump mocking Neil Bush about his energy. That was totally great. Hey, listen, let's hope Trump can actually really turn the tide. This is where the Q people come in, right? Trust him, POTUS, trust him, POTUS, trust him, POTUS, trust him, POTUS. And if he could come in and do that mega, Sun-Uranus conjunction in Gemini and just flip everything at the last moment, and I will tip my hat to the Orange Man. Okay? But right now, he's fighting for his life. But I will say this. People who have come into contact with him and have crossed swords with him have not done well. I think at least we can agree on this, right? They have not done well. Whether it was Neil Bush or Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or Hillary Clinton or what's his name? The guy from New York, Schneiderman. I mean, there are people, Eric Schneiderman, there are people who have taken him on. They haven't done well. Aside from everything else, aside from the left-right collusion, the neocons and the neolibs, Trump seems to wind up coming out on top with a lot of these imbroglios. How about that for word? Imbroglios that he gets involved with. These dust-ups. All right, why don't we get on out of here? There's a big day ahead of us, and I hope you live it to your fullest, because that's really essential. I mean, one of the things that happens, in this world is that we get really connected now to all this information and being in the box and hoping, wishing, praying for, the white hats to come in and save the day and turn the tide and all that stuff, right? And a lot of that is really external. So it was Jeb Bush. Yeah, it was Jeb Bush. I'm sorry, Jeb Bush. Not Neil Bush. I'm sorry, Jeb Bush. I get a little spaced out sometimes. But it was great, Jeb Bush. Thank you. This is why I have the chat room. Judy. What would I do without you, Judy? Anyway, we get so caught up in the outer. Do something for yourself. Stay on your game. Have plans, have dreams. One of the reasons why I love doing astrology, and that's the other side of this coin for me, is astrology. One of the reasons why I love astrology is I get to work with people. And I had a client yesterday where, you get into a chart and you just kind of, take the chart apart and you spend some time with a person. Sorry, it was Jeb Bush. So you shouldn't be sorry for anything. So this person was just turned 70. Clearly, somebody made a huge amount of sacrifice for their lives, for their kids, their grandkids, sacrifice. And the stories I hear as an astrologer with people in their lives, man, they're tough. People have had tough lives. And I saw, true node, Taurus in the 10th house, right? And here's Uranus creeping up to the 10th house. We got into all this sacrifice stuff. And I said, look, I think that you really need to build something. And you really need to start something. I know it's late in the game, but you need to build it. You need to start it. It's got to be natural. It's got to be organic. It's got to be something tactile. And I said, do you have anything like that? She says, oh, I love paper. I make cards. I make greeting cards. I'm like, boom, right? And that was her passion. And, again, even at 70 years old, look, is she going to become Hallmark? Is this woman going to become Hallmark? No. But could she create a line of cards that are picked up locally and, would it give her like an immense amount of joy and purpose to be involved in something like that? Absolutely. Absolutely. So we got into that. And man, the energy changed. The energy completely changed. We went from the immense amount of sacrifice and the pain and the suffering to all of a sudden bringing it up to the top of the chart, and bang, there it was. When it's a separate discussion, but maybe we'll talk about this on Sunday night. The whole idea with working with a chart is to find the through line. And what I mean by the through line is it's going to be that thread that leads you through the chart to a point and an opening where there's possibility and potential. So we clicked into that yesterday. And the reason I'm talking about it is because that's an everyday kind of thing. This was a passion that this person had, put on the side because personal reasons, but we got to it. So I'm putting that out to you today. What is your personal passion? What are you into? What do you feel good about? What makes you feel good? And not good in the sense that, I'm going to go have 4 margaritas feel good, which is fine. Whatever. If you want to do that, I'm certainly not going to judge you. But there's that alchemical moment of creating something. That's important stuff. So I urge you today to continue with that part of your life and that part of your journey, because that's the part that's important. And there are no terms and conditions for that. And the only ones that exist are the ones that you have set up. You can always renegotiate that. I'm Robert Phoenix. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame. Thank you for joining me. And I'll be back tomorrow, 24 hours from today. Have a great one.